Hello and welcome to our new YouTube tutorial in which we're going to talk about Document Object Model, which is simply known as DOM. You will learn about how to manipulate the HTML page, or in other words, how to interact with HTML elements using JavaScript. DOM specifies how JavaScript can access and update the content of the web page. It is a cross-platform and language-independent model for manipulating and interacting with the elements in HTML documents. The DOM is neither part of HTML nor part of JavaScript. It is a separate set of rules and it can't work without a document. When you create the web page and load it in the browser, DOM is enabled automatically. The document is represented as a family tree. A family tree represents a real family, describes the relationships between the family members, and uses terms like parent, child, and sibling. So one member of a family can be a parent to others, while also being the child of another family member and the sibling of another family member. This can be represented by the following model. Let's take a look at the diagram and go through the web page structure to see what I'm talking about exactly. The document begins by opening an HTML tag. All the other elements of the web page are contained within this element, meaning that it is a parent. Since all the other elements are inside, the HTML tag has no parent itself. It also doesn't have siblings. If we move one level deeper, we will find two elements, head and body. They exist side by side, which makes them siblings. They have the same parent, HTML, but they also contain children, so they are parents themselves. The head element has two children, meta and title, siblings of one another. The children of the body element are h1, p, and ul, all siblings of one another. If we go down deeper, still we will find that ul is also a parent. It has three children, all of them the li elements. Instead of using the term family tree, it's more correct to call a document as a node tree. So what is a node? The document is a collection of nodes. Everything in an HTML document is a node. So as we said, the two nodes representing the head and body elements are examples of child nodes, and the HTML elements node above them is a parent node. When we talk about the nodes, we need to consider three main things: element nodes, text nodes, and attribute nodes. If you take a look at the screen, you will see here a simple paragraph with attribute and content. This is my first paragraph. P element itself is an element node. It contains text. This is my first paragraph, which is called a text node. Attributes are used to give more specific information about an element. So in the document object model, a class attribute with all other attributes is called an attribute node. Okay, so it was a brief overview of what DOM is. Let's go ahead and start to learn about some of the methods of the DOM, which are used to select the individual and multiple elements in HTML document. I have created a new folder on the desktop called DOM Crash Course. Right now it is empty, so let's go ahead and open it in VS Code. I'm going to create two different files. The first one is going to be index.html. As for the second file, it's going to be script.js. After that, let's create the basic HTML document. In the index.html file, I'm going to use emmet. Let's insert here the exclamation mark and then press the tab or enter. So here we go. Let's change the title and make it DOM Crash Course. Then I'm going to link the script.js file. For that, let's open script tag and then specify the path of the file in the source attribute. Alright, lastly, I'm going to run the file to the browser. For that, let's use one of the VS Code packages called Live Server. It allows us to run the project to the browser and make updates without refreshing the page each time. It is a great package, so I recommend installing it. Okay, finally, let's go ahead and place the editor and browser side by side and get started. As I said, I'm going to start by describing some of the DOM methods which are used to select an individual and the multiple elements. The first method that I want to introduce to you is getElementById. Actually, this method is used to select individual elements in HTML. It returns the element that has the ID attribute with the specified value. In order to get the element, we need to specify the relevant value of the ID attribute. The value of ID is going to be a string, which then can be used to uniquely identify the element. Okay, before we start to use the DOM methods, let's at first create some content in the HTML document. I'm going to create h1 heading element with the ID attribute. Let's insert here heading and then the text hi there. So in order to select this element with getElementById, first of all, we need to get access to the HTML document. So we have to write document. Actually, the document is an object and getElementById is one of the built-in methods. The document should be followed by dot operator and then we need to use getElementById. Remember that you must protect the camel case rule. You need to write each word with a capital letter except for the first one. After that, we have to specify the value of the ID attribute inside the parentheses, heading. As you know, in CSS, we specify the ID attribute using the £, but now, in case of getElementById, we just need to indicate here the value of ID, without any signs. Alright, let's store this element in the variable. I'm going to call it heading. And then run it to the console. So, as you can see, we have successfully selected the heading element. Okay, I want to mention that every element in DOM is an object if we check the data type of this variable using the typeOf operator. Then we will get an object. As usual in the HTML document, the ID attributes are unique, but if there is more than one element with the same ID attribute, then the getElementById method returns only the first element. In order to prove that, let's create another heading element, let's say h3, and assign to it ID attribute with the same value, heading, and then place here test. Then I'm going to select it. Let's create new variable and call it heading2, and then select element. We need document.getElementById, and then insert here heading. Then finally, let's log it to the console. So as you see, we got here again the first heading element. So remember that the ID attribute should be always unique. Alright, let's comment the second heading out. Besides selecting the elements, we can change the content of them. For that, we use the properties called TextContent and InnerHTML. Before we talk about any of those properties, I'm going to create some more elements in the HTML document. Let's create a list element with the ID list and with some list items. Let's open li element and insert here home, then duplicate it twice and change the content. I'm going to insert here about and then contact. After that, let's go ahead and select this element. I'm going to create a variable, let's call it list, and then select UL element using again getElementById method. Let's insert here the value of ID attribute list. Alright, at first let's go ahead and talk about the TextContent property. It sets or returns the textual content of the specified node and all its descendants. In descendants, I mean the children of the element, the grandchildren, and so on. So if we run to the console, list.textContent, then we will get the textual content of the entire list element. We are able to change the text content of the element dynamically. For that, we can write list.textContent, and then assign to it hi there. So as you can see, the entire content is replaced with the new one. If we check the Elements tab and find the UL element, you will see that we no longer have here the li element. We just have the newly created textual content inside of the UL element. Alright, so that's the way how text content property works. Let's move on and talk about the inner HTML. Inner HTML sets or returns the HTML content of an element. In other words, it returns the whole HTML content, including the tags, attributes, and text nodes. Let's comment this line out and then run to the console list.innerHTML. As you can see, now we have here the content of the UL element, but instead of just the textual content, we got the HTML tags. So again, inner HTML property returns the whole HTML content and not just the text. Like the text content property, we are able to change the content dynamically, and also we can specify the HTML tags as well. Let's see what I'm talking about. Let's change the content of the list. We need list.innerHTML, and let's assign to it hi there. So for now, at a glance, the inner HTML works in the exact same way as the text content property. If we check the Elements tab, we will find that the content is replaced with the new text hi there. But now if we wrap the text with h1 tags, then the text will be transformed into the heading, and also if we check again the elements, we will find that we have here a new h1 heading element. Let's see what happens if we use here the text content instead. Now, as you can see, the h1 tags are treated as the plain text, also the same we have inside the Elements tab. So that's the main difference between the text content and inner HTML properties. Alright, so we talked about how to select and manipulate the individual elements using the getElementById method, and also we described how text content and inner HTML properties work. Now it's time to learn about other DOM methods that select the individual and multiple elements in the HTML document. We will discuss methods called querySelector and querySelectorAll. At first, let's start with querySelector. The querySelector method returns the first element that matches a specified CSS selector in the document. Remember that it only returns the first element that matches the specified selector. If querySelector cannot find the relevant element, then it returns null. I'm going to comment this code out, and then let's go ahead and select the UL element using querySelector. For that, let's create new variable and call it list. Then we need again document dot querySelector. So now inside the parentheses we can specify either the attribute, in this case ID, or the tag name itself, UL. If we run the variable to the console, then we will get the UL element. As we said, we can select the element using ID attribute as well. For that, we should use the pound sign, which is used to select elements with the ID attributes in CSS. So, as you can see, we have the same result in the console. If we change the ID attribute into class, then instead of the pound sign, we have to place here the dot, which actually is used to select the elements with the class names in CSS. So again, we have the same result. As we already said, querySelector method returns only the first element that matches a specified CSS selector. Let's select the li element. I'm going to create a new variable, let's call it li, and then select it using again querySelector method. Then let's run to the console li. As you can see, we have here only the first li element. So using the querySelector method, you're not able to select multiple elements, and that's the moment when we can use the query selector all method. So the query selector all method acts almost in the same way as the query selector, but it returns all the elements in the document that matches a specified CSS selector. Let's create a new variable, and I'm going to call it LIs. Then select all the LI elements. And then finally, let's log them to the console. So if we save, we will get here all three LI elements, but represented in a kind of different way. I mean, they are represented as a node list. Actually, node list is an array-like object. Its items have the zero-based index numbers. Also, node list has the length property. But again, it's an array-like object and not an array. In order to prove that, I'm going to use one of the array methods called a push, which, as you know, adds the item to an array at the end of it. So if we write lis.push and insert here something, hello, then we will get an error saying that the push is not a function. Okay, let's get rid of this line of code from here. Like query selector, using the query selector all method, we are able to select the elements with the attributes. Let's assign to the first two LI elements class names list item. Then I'm going to create new variable, call it list items, and then select all elements with the class name list item. Use again query selector all method. If we run this variable to the console, then we will get only the first two LI elements. Alright, so that's the way how query selector and query selector all methods work. Besides them, there are a couple of other methods to select elements, but they are not quite frequently used. Get element by ID, query selector, and query selector all methods are the popular ones. Therefore, I'm not going to discuss the rest of the methods. Alright, let's move on to the next topic. It's time to talk about another feature of document object model. If you are familiar with CSS, then you know that CSS is used for styling and designing the HTML page, but in most cases it happens in a static mode. DOM allows us to use JavaScript in order to change the styles of the HTML elements dynamically. Alright, let's comment everything out, and then go ahead and select the heading element. I'm going to create a new variable, heading, and then select it using getElementById method. So in order to change the style of this element, we need to use the style object with its properties. So we need heading.style followed by the color property. I'm going to make it red. So you see that the color of the heading is changed into red. If we check the heading element in the Elements tab, you will notice that it contains a style attribute with the color property. So when we use style object, then we create inline styling for the HTML element. Instead of the color, you can use any of the CSS properties, but there is a slight difference. For example, let's use background color. Write heading.style.background. You know that in CSS we write this property using dash. Let's make the background color black. So if we save, then you will see that we have an error saying invalid left-hand side assignment. It happens because in JavaScript dash is the same as the minus sign, which means the subtraction. So if the CSS property contains two or more words, then we should use a camel case method. Now the background color of the heading element is changed into black. So you're able to use any of the CSS properties here. Okay, let's use query selector all method and select li elements. I'm going to create new variable lis and then select them using query selector all method. As you remember, query selector all method returns a node list. If we run lis to the console, then we will get a node list with 3 li items. Suppose that we want to change the style of one of the li elements, let's say the second one. For that, we have to select the second element like so. We need lis variable, followed by the square brackets in which we have to specify the index number of the item. In this case, we need 1 because the items have 0 based index numbers. And then we have to change the style. Let's use here background color and make it red. So as you can see, the second list element has changed its background color into red. Now suppose that we want to change the background color for all li elements. Then in order to do that, we have to use either for loop, or we can transform the node list into the array and then use one of the array helper methods. But in this case, let's use just for loop. Let's get rid of this line of code from here. Then use for loop. We need to declare the variable I, which is going to be the initializer. Let's make it 0. Next comes the condition. We need I is less than li.length. And then we need increment I++. As the block of code, we need lis. Then in square brackets we have to indicate I as the index number, followed by the style object. Next we need background color. In this case I'm going to make it royal blue. So here we have all the list items with blue backgrounds. Again, if you check the HTML document, you will see that all the list items have the style attributes with background color. Alright, there is another way to change the style of HTML elements. For that we have to use a property called CSS Text. It allows us to add multiple styles at the same time to an element. There is one thing to remember and note: CSS Text property removes all default inline styles and add new styles. Let's see how it works. Suppose that we want to change some styles for the first li element. Therefore we need lis with the index number 0, followed by the style object, and then we have to use CSS Text property. Let's assign to it background color. In this case we don't need to use camel case anymore, because we need to assign the value to the CSS Text property as a string. Let's make the background color coral. As we said, we can change multiple styles simultaneously. They should be separated by semicolons. Let's change the color, make it white. And also increase the font size, make it 25 pixels. So as you see, the first list item has changed its styles, and if you check it in HTML document, you will notice that the recent inline style is removed and it's replaced with the new styles. That's the way how CSS Text property actually works. Alright, there is another way to manipulate the styles in DOM using properties called class name and class list. Let's at first talk about class name property. In general, it sets or returns the class name of an element. In other words, it sets or returns the value of an element's class attribute. Class name property always returns the string value. In order to use the class name property, I'm going to create some CSS styles. Let's open style tags in the head element. Then create new class, change BG. I'm in the background. And let's set background color to brown. Next, create another class. I'm going to call it change FT, like font. At first, let's change the style of the font, make it italic, and then increase the font size, make it 40 pixels. Okay, let's add those styles to the heading element. First of all, I'm going to comment those lines out. So in order to change the background color for the heading element, we have to assign to it the class name change.bg, which we have just created. So we need to write heading.className, and we have to assign to it change.bg. So as you can see, heading element's background became brown, and if you check it in HTML document, then you will find that it has a new class attribute which we have just assigned to it. Now let's add the second class attribute change.ft to the heading element in the exact same way. So right now the font size of the heading element became larger and italic, but the background color of this element is no longer brown. It means that when we assigned to it the second class name change.ft, then it has replaced the previous one, which was change.bg. In order to make both class attributes work at the same time, we can use a little trick. Let's comment this line out, then write heading.className. Next we need plus equals operator, then we need quotes, at first space, and then change.ft class. So in this case, plus equals operator helps us to add a new class to the previous one. As you can see, now all the styles are applied to the heading element. In general, plus equals operator works in the following way. If we create the variable number 10, and then if we write num plus equals to 20, then we will get 30, the sum of 10 and 20. If we run it again, then we will get 50 and so on. Okay, so that was all about the class name property. Let's see how the second property, class list, actually works. At first, let's see what this property returns. I'm going to run to the console heading.classList. As you see, we have here an array-like object called DOM token list. We have here the class names, also the values of the class names, and also this object does have the length property. Let's go ahead and create a new class name inside the style tags. I'm going to call it change.cl, color, and then let's make color white. So in order to assign this class name to the heading element, we have to write heading.classList. Next, we have to use one of the methods called add. It should be followed by the parenthesis, and inside the parenthesis, we need to indicate the class name as a string without dots. So as you can see, the color of the heading element is changed. We are able to remove the class name. For that, we have to use another method called remove. So now the heading no longer has the white color. Alright, so that's it about the DOM styles. We have seen how to change the styles of HTML elements using a couple of different ways. Let's move on to the next, one of the most important topics in DOM and basically in JavaScript as well. I'm going to show you how can be the web page interactive and dynamic using events. So what is an event? Events are actions that happen on the web page. As you know, in order to execute the function, we need to call it. The same happens in case of the events, but in that case, users can manage to invoke the functions. The situation when, for example, the user clicks the button, presses the keys on the keyboard, or moves the mouse, and many others. Actually, there are a couple of different ways to set up JavaScript events. In order to demonstrate them, I'm going to make slight changes to our code. Let's comment the UL element out, then comment those styles and the JavaScript code out as well. Next, I'm going to change the ID attribute into class, and also create the button with the class name btn and with the text click here. Okay, after that I'm going to select those two elements. Let's create new variable heading, In this case, I'm going to select the heading element using query selector method. Let's duplicate this line of code. Change the name of the variable, we need btn, and also change the class name. Alright, now we have to attach an event handler to this button. For that, we need to write btn dot, and then we need to place here on before the actual name of the event. On should be followed by the name of the event. I'm going to use click event. So in this case, I used click event, which is one of the most frequently used. Besides the click event, there are lots of different events like toggle, mouse over, mouse out, key press, load, and many others. Now we need to assign to that event the function, which then will be executed once we click the button. In this case, I'm going to use an arrow function, and then run to the console, clicked. So if we click the button, then we will get clicked in the console. It means that once we click the button, then the event was fired and the function was executed. We can use different events. Suppose that we want to change the background color of the heading element once we mouse over the button. For that, we have to attach to the button another event handler called onMouseOver. Then we have to assign to it an arrow function, and as the block of code, I'm going to insert here heading.style. In this case, I'm going to use CSS Text property because I want to change the background color to brown, and also I want to change the color of the text. Let's make it white. So once we mouse over the button, then the styles of the heading element will be changed. If we want to get rid of these styles once we mouse out, then we can attach another event to the button. In this case, we need onMouseOut. Then let's grab this line of code and paste here. I'm going to change the value of the background color property. Let's make it transparent, and also change the color, make it black. So once we mouse over the button, then the styles of the heading element will be changed. If we want to get rid of these styles, then we have to mouse out. Alright, besides that, we can attach event handlers to the elements in a different way. We are able to add to the element events as the HTML attribute. Let's comment this code out, then create a function. I'm going to call it click button, and then again run to the console, clicked. After that, let's go to the index.html file and add to the button element onClick attribute. Now, in order to execute the function click button, which we have just created, we have to call it and we have to write it as the value of onClick attribute. Now if we click the button, the event will be fired and the function will be executed. Alright, so that's another way to create the events. Next, I'm going to show you a different method. We are able to create events using event listeners. In document object model, we have a method called addEventListener, which allows us to attach an event listener to an element and then execute the block of code once the event occurs. Let's see what I'm talking about. I'm going to comment this function out, and also I want to delete the onClick event handler from the button element. So let's go ahead and attach the event listener to the button. Remember that addEventListener is a case sensitive, so you need to write the words with capital letters except the first one. You need to use camel case. Then we need to open parentheses and pass the first argument, which is going to be the name of the event. It should be the string. Use here click. Again, remember that when you use an event listener, you always need to pass the event name without on. So you need to write just click and not on click. The second parameter in the addEventListener method is going to be the function. Let's use again arrow function. So On click, I'm going to change the styles of heading. We need heading.style.css text. Let's make the background color brown. And also change the color, make it white. Now if we click the button, then the heading element will change its background color and color. Okay, so that's the way how an event listener works. Now I'm going to talk about an event object. When the event occurs, the event object is created automatically. It gives us some information about the event. I mean the information about which element the event happened on, which of the keys was pressed on a key press event, or exactly at what spot the user clicked, and so on. When the event object is passed into a function, it is often given as a parameter called e or sometimes event. Alright, let's comment this line out, then pass the argument here, I mean the event object, and run this object to the console. So once we click the button, we will get mouse event in the console. If you drop down it, you will see the list of different properties and their proper values. Let's consider some of them. For example, we have here the shift key, which has the value false. It means that when I click the button, I wasn't pressing the shift key. If I reload the page and then click the button, and at the same time I keep pressing the shift key, then it will get the value true. Besides that, you can find here the client X and client Y properties. Those properties indicate the exact coordinates of the clicked spot on the page. Client X shows us the number of pixels from the left, and client Y shows us the number of pixels from the top. Alright, down below you can find the type of the event, which tells us that it's a click event. Also, we have here a target property, which I think is the most important property in that list. You see that it has a value, button.btn. This is the element that we have attached the click event to. Let's use this property and see exactly what it returns. Run to the console, e.target. If we click the button, then we'll get the button element with its content. Okay, that's it about events. Let's move on to the next topic. DOM allows us to use methods in order to manipulate the attributes of the HTML elements. So next I'm going to show you how to get and set the attributes of the elements, how to check if an element has the specified attribute or not, and also how to remove them. The first method which I would like to describe is getAttribute. It returns the value of the attribute with the specified name of the element. The value that is returned using this method is a string. Alright, let's go ahead and create a paragraph with some dummy text, and also assign to it ID with the value main paragraph and the class attribute paragraph. Then let's select this element. I'm going to create a new variable, call it paragraph, and select p element using query selector method. In this case, I'm going to use class name paragraph. Alright, now I'm going to get the attributes of the paragraph. Let's run to the console, paragraph.getAttribute, and inside the parentheses, let's specify ID. So as you see, we got here the value of ID attribute, main paragraph. We can do the same for class attribute as well. So let's place here class. Now, as you see, we have here paragraph, which is the value of the class attribute. If we specify the attribute which doesn't exist, for example, title, then the getAttribute method will return null. So again, getAttribute method is used to get a value of the HTML elements attribute. Alright, the second method which is used to manipulate the elements attributes is setAttribute method. This method sets the value of an attribute for the specified element. If the attribute already exists, the value is updated. Otherwise, a new attribute is added with the specified name and the value. The setAttribute method uses two parameters. The first one is an attribute name, and the second one is an attribute value. you need to pass both of them as the string values. I'm going to change the background color for a paragraph. For that, we can add to it attribute style with the background color. So we need paragraph.setAttribute. Then as the first argument, we have to pass here name of the attribute style. And then we need the value background color. Let's make it coral. So as you can see, the background color of the paragraph is changed. If we check it in the HTML document, you will find that it has a style attribute with the value background color coral. Okay, so using the setAttribute method, you're able to set any of the attributes to the HTML document. Next, I'm going to show you how we can remove the attribute from the element. For that, we have to use a method called removeAttribute. Suppose that we want to remove style attribute from the paragraph. For that, we have to write paragraph.removeAttribute, and then inside of the parentheses we need to specify which attribute we want to remove. Let's insert here style. Now the background color is no longer applied to the paragraph because we have just removed the style attribute from the paragraph. The next method that I'm going to describe allows us to check whether an element has the attribute or not. This method is called hasAttribute. Let's go ahead and check if the paragraph has the style attribute. I'm going to run to the console paragraph.hasAttribute. Then insert here style. So we have false because we have already deleted the style attribute. But if we check the class attribute, then we will get true because paragraph definitely has the class attribute. Alright, that's it about attributes. We have discussed a couple of methods, and now I'm going to move on to the next topic. I'm going to talk about DOM navigation. You remember from the beginning of this tutorial that the HTML document represents a structure like a family tree. So now you will see how we can navigate between the different elements using some DOM properties. First of all, I'm going to create some HTML elements. Let's create div element with the class wrapper. Then inside that div element, I'm going to insert UL with class list and with a couple of list items. Let's write here home, about, and content. So in this case, the div element is a parent for UL, which itself is a parent for li elements and the child for a div element. Also, li elements are children of UL element and they are siblings to each other. So let's see how we can navigate between those elements using a couple of DOM properties. I think it would be better if we select and navigate from the second li element. Let's assign to it ID attribute, list item. Then let's go ahead and select it. I'm going to create new variable list item and then select li element using getElementById method. So in order to access its parent element, we can use a property called parentNode. If we run to the console listItem.parentNode, we will get the UL element. Using this property, we can access to the list element's grandparent as well, which in this case is wrapper div. So if we run to the console listItem.parentNode and then again parentNode, then we will get here the div element. Instead of the parent node, we can use the exact similar property, which is called parent element. They work in the exact same way. If we change parent node into parent elements, then we will get here again the UL element. Alright, next I'm going to use the property which is called child nodes. Before that, let's select the UL element, create new variable list, and select the list elements using query selector method. And then run to the console list.childNodes. So you can see that it gives us a node list, and inside of it we have all the items which are included in the list element. Also we have here the text items. They are called text nodes. They are actually the white spaces that exist between the elements. When you use child nodes property, they are treated as the text nodes. If you don't want to return the text nodes, then you can use a different property called children. So now we no longer have the text nodes, and also instead of the node list, we have here a different object called HTML collection. Like a node list, HTML collection is an array-like object. Its items have 0 base index numbers, and also it has the length property. Alright, next I'm going to use a property called firstChild. Let's run to the console, list.firstChild. So as you can see, this property returned the first text node, which is again the white space. If we use here first element child instead of the first child, then we will get the first li element from the list. So that's the difference between the first child and first element child properties. Like them, we also have a last child and a last element child properties. They work in a similar way, so I'm not going to show it. You can test them on your own. Alright, so we have referred to how to access the parent and the child elements so far. The only thing that I want to demonstrate here is how to get access to the siblings. For that, we need to use the properties previous sibling, previous element sibling, next sibling, and next element sibling. So if we run to the console, list item.previous sibling, then we will get again the text node, which is a white space. So like child nodes and the first child properties, previous sibling and also next sibling properties count the white space as a text node. Again, the solution is to use previous element sibling and next element sibling. Alright, so that's it about the DOM navigation. Let's move on to the next topic. In the document object model, we are able to create the elements using a couple of methods. Suppose that we want to create a fourth li element with some textual content inside of the list. For that, we have to go through a couple of different steps. First of all, we have to create an empty li element. In order to do that, we have to use a method called createElement. So let's create a variable. I'm going to call it new element, new el. Then we need document.createElement. And inside the parentheses, we have to pass the tag name, li. Then run it to the console. As you can see, we have here just an empty li element. Now the next step is to create its textual content. For that, I'm going to use another method called createTextNode. So let's create another variable. I'm going to call it text. Then we need document.createTextNode. Inside the parentheses, we have to pass the text node. That should be the content of the element. I'm going to pass here blog. And now let's run this variable to the console. So we have here blog. Alright, so we created an element and its content. Now we need to connect them somehow. For that, there is a method called appendChild, which will allow us to add the content to the element. So we need to write new element dot append child, and as the argument we have to specify the name of the variable text. So now if we check the element and display it in the console, then we will find that it already has the text content. So we can say that the element is ready, and now we have to add it to the list. For that, again, we have to use appendChild method, and we have to append a new element to the list. We need list.appendChild, and inside the parentheses we have to pass new element. Next, I'm going to run list to the console. As you see, the newly created li element is added to the list. It is placed at the end of the list as the fourth item. Actually, this is the default behavior, but we can change it and define the position of the li element manually. For that, we have to use a method called insertBefore. So we need to attach this method to the list element. We need list.insertBefore. This method takes two arguments. The first one is going to be the new element. As for the second one, we have to insert list.children. It points to all the li elements, and now we have to specify the index number. So if we write here 0, then the new element will be placed before the first li element. So with this index number, you can manually define the position of an element in the list. If we change it and make 1, then the new element will be placed as the second item. Alright, the last thing that I want to show you is how to delete the elements. Suppose that we want to delete the newly created element. For that, first of all, we have to get access to its parent element, which is list. Then we need to use the method called removeChild. And inside of the parentheses, we have to indicate the name of the element, new element. So as you can see, the element is removed from the list. Alright, so that's it about creating the elements in DOM. We are done with this topic, and actually our crash course is finished. I hope it was interesting and helpful and you learned lots of things. If you enjoyed and liked this tutorial, then please thumbs up, tell us your opinion in the comment section, share the video, subscribe to our channel, and click the bell to get notified on coming videos. Okay, see you soon.